fixed. I just wanted to say. Rules Committee will come to order. We are here for consideration of H.R. 1633, the Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act of 2011. We're very happy to welcome the distinguished chair of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Energy and Power and the ranking member. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being here, and let me say that without objection, any prepared statement that you have will appear in the record in its entirety. And before we proceed with your testimony, let me say that my old friend Caspian is here, and I'd like to ask Mr. Polis. Caspian and I have been friends for probably about maybe 15 or 20% of his life, because this is my second meeting with Caspian, and so I'd like to introduce his father, our distinguished colleague from Boulder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm glad to no longer be the most junior member on the committee.
The ratio has not changed, I'd like to say. With all due respect, if you want to give up your seat to Caspian,
well,
I mean, I'd be happy to do that.
He hasn't declared his party affiliation yet, and I do know there is one opening on your side, so we'll see how he grows up. But,
well, we would welcome him, I will tell you.
I was hoping he would have a budding interest in farm dust and particulates, but unfortunately he's dozed off, Mr. Chair. So.
Well, as I said, I could probably put him into a great slumber for a long period of time.
He was dressed in a polo onesie yesterday.
I saw it.
That was his.
I saw it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Jared. We're very happy to have both of you here. Gentlemen, as I said, without objection, any prepared statement that you have will appear in the record in its entirety, and we welcome your summary. I don't know if that thing is working. Is that?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay.
You would think that I would learn that by now. Thank you all very much for giving us the opportunity to talk about today H.R. 1633. H.R. 1633 is a relatively simple bill. It would simply prohibit the Environmental Protection Agency from issuing any new national ambient air quality standard for coarse particulate matter for at least 1 year from the date of the enactment of the legislation. It does not in any way affect fine particulate matter. And I might say EPA certainly does regulate particulate matter today, and there are some areas of the country that are in non-attainment where they're regulating farmers today. In fact, we had one farmer testified that for every cow he had on his farm, he had to use 4 gallons of water to keep the dust down to meet the requirements. This bill would also limit federal regulation of nuisance dust by EPA to areas in which it is not regulated under state, tribal, or local laws, where the nuisance dust causes substantial adverse effects and the benefits of federal regulation outweigh the cost. This bill also defines nuisance dust, and is defined to mean that particulate matter that is generated primarily from natural sources, unpaved roads, agricultural activities, earth moving, or other activities typically conducted in rural areas and meets other specific criteria. And I would say that it specifically does not include air emitted directly from combustion, and it does not include air comprised of residuals from the combustion of coal. So we've tried to define this in a way that it truly is rural dust. That really is what this bill is all about. It does not prohibit EPA from doing it in the future. It simply says we want you to wait for at least 1 year from the signing of this bill. I might also add that we have 185 organizations that have written letters of support, including almost every rural farming entity that I'm aware of. So thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member Slaughter, and all of my colleagues on this august committee for allowing me to testify here today. Mr. Chairman, I'm here to testify on behalf of the minority side against this god-awful bill, the H.R. 1633, which could have a devastating effect on the EPA's ability to enforce the Clean Air Act. Mr. Chairman, I oppose this bill on the basis of both process and substance grounds. And I am also offering an amendment which would seek to improve upon this bill's potential impact. First of all, the Congressional Budget Office scored this bill and determined that it will cost EPA $10 million in discretionary funding over 5 years to cover the cost of carrying out changes to existing emission control standards, as well as other activities to study the need and feasibility of modifying the EPA's national monitoring network for particulate matter as this bill requires. Since this $10 million is not appropriated anywhere within this bill, that would appear to violate the discretionary cut-and-go policy that the majority party put in place at the beginning of the 112th Congress. Additionally, on the issue of substance, I oppose this bill because it would dramatically weaken the Clean Air Act by eliminating the EPA's ability to regulate particulate matter from a broad range of sources, as well as jeopardize existing state and federal regulations that apply to fine and coarse particulate matter across all sources of that pollution. Although the title of this bill suggests that it covers only dust for farms, the bill creates a broad new, non-scientific category of pollution called nuisance dust, which it exempts from the Clean Air Act completely without any scientific evidence that doing so would not harm public health. The bill would exempt from the Clean Air Act any particulate matter pollution that is emitted from sources such as open pit mines, mining processing plants, sand and gravel mines, smelters, coal mines, coal processing plants, cement kilns, and waste and recovery facilities. These facilities emit fine particulates, coarse particulates, arsenic, lead, mercury, cadmium, zinc, chromium, and other heavy metals, and all of which could fall under this bill's broad exemptions from the Clean Air Act. So I oppose this bill for the harm that it could do to the public health. But if the majority insists on bringing this bill to the floor, I urge this committee to allow for an open or modified rule so that the Rush Amendment and others may be brought up in order to improve on the bill's many shortcomings. Mr. Chairman, I thank you. I thank the Ranking Member Slaughter, and I thank all my colleagues.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rush. Thanks to both of you again for being here and for your thoughtful comments on the legislation. And I recognize your opposition, Mr. Rush, to the legislation as you've just outlined. And I will say that, again, we are hoping, I'm going to encourage the committee to make most of the amendments that have been submitted to the committee in order, with the exception of amendments that are non-germane or duplicative. And so I hope that that will include an opportunity for you to have your proposal debated and voted on the House floor. So I have no questions from either of you other than the fact that we obviously have this as our item for the rest of the week, but I think people know that our attention is focused on lots of other work that needs to take place around here in the next several days. But this will be, I'm sure, a fascinating debate for those who have their focus on farm dust.
Thank you.
Gentlewoman from Grandfather Community.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate both of you all coming and presenting your points of view on this bill, and I have no questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's nice to see both of you today. I really, in reading about this, I thought we had come up with a solution in search of a problem. But now that I hear Mr. Rush and see this, it's much deeper than I thought with all the exemptions to this. And it's not farm dust, but it's what's called nuisance dust.
Yeah.
There's some awfully good amendments that have been proposed, I think, to try to do this. And I think hope very much that we can make them in order. I particularly want to cite Mr. Rush's amendment, Ms. Eshu's amendment, Mr. Waxman's, and Mr. Markey's. We're very much concerned that since cement factories and mines and all open pit mining are exempt from this, that there could be a problem. I particularly thought Ms. Eshu said that if this bill would increase the incidence of asthma attacks, respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, or premature mortality, then this exemption should not be granted. I do hope that's made in order. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bishop.
I don't have any specific questions except to thank you for this particular issue, bringing it before us. As one can see, I am one who enjoys food to an excess, and that this bill will assist us in making sure that my desires are fully situated. Sometimes I think the only dust some people around here will approve of is pixie dust, but this is a good bill. It moves us forward. Thank you for bringing it to us.
Thank you.
Mr. Governor.
Maybe we should regulate pixie dust while we're at it. No, that's something you might want to do, because we're actually doing something. We're trying to correct a problem that doesn't exist, but with this bill, it goes much, much further. And I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record a copy of the Statement of Administration Policy, which would recommend a veto on this. I'd like to submit a letter from the League of Conservation Voters talking about why this is a bad bill, as well as the American Lung Association, which is also against this legislation. I mean, without getting into all the details, I think this is this is legislation that should not be coming to the floor, and I think it, under the auspices of doing no harm, can actually do some harm in areas that that might actually pose a health threat to individuals. Let me, this is, Mr. Whitfield, this is nothing against you. It's just against your leadership. We should be debating the payroll tax cut bill, or the extension of unemployment insurance, or a real jobs bill to put people back to work. Well, we haven't, and instead we're doing this, which is going nowhere, which again I think is a bad piece of legislation. And and the EPA says it has no intention of regulating farm dust. So I mean, we're not even faced with a problem. But it is astounding to me that here we are at this stage in the Republican tenure here, and we have yet to deal with a real jobs bill, and we've got this payroll tax cut that's about to expire. 160 million people will be adversely impacted if we don't extend it. On top of that, during this very difficult economy, all these people who are without jobs, who need the extension of unemployment benefits to keep them afloat, that's where our focus should be, not on this. And so, I appreciate you both being here, but I wish you were here presenting a payroll tax cut extension or an extension of unemployment benefits or a real jobs bill. That would be more. You've been saying that for a long time, and I've been disappointed. So I yield back my time. Yeah, I'm tuned.
Good. Good. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Hastings. Okay. Mr. Scott. Thank you. Casper.
Thank you. It's my understanding that the scope of the bill, and I guess I question whether this is deliberate or inadvertent, includes much more than agricultural activity, which everybody seems to agree should not be subject to regulations, even the EPA administrator does. What about the activities of smelting, copper mining operations? Is this bill intended to make sure, to prevent the EPA from making sure that there's not particulate or air quality standards being breached from those kinds of operations?
Well, we certainly don't intend to exempt mining activities, and I might add that there currently are on the books 18 federal laws relating to mining activities on emissions and everything else. We also explicitly say that anything relating to combustion is not nuisance dust in the legislation.
Yeah, the issue wouldn't be around combustion, I understand, but it seems to start so broad, and then you need to come up with the exclusions. And I understand there is a amendment offered in committee to clarify the mining issue. Is that correct?
Was there?
Yeah.
Perhaps the gentleman could address that effort in committee and why that was necessary.
It's my my recollection rather, and there was an amendment that dealt with the other mining and the other aspects of this bill that's that the author of the bill it lost in committee, and the author of the bill didn't address it in the baseline bill. So we did try to deal with it, but it did not go anywhere.
And I believe that our colleague, Mr. Markey, has brought forth an amendment. I hope this committee will make that in order. Again, it seems like there is great consensus on all sides that the EPA should not be regulating farm dust, I guess would be a colloquial term. But obviously, if there are activities that represent a danger to the public health, they should be under the same clean air standards as anything else. So hopefully that'll be clarified over the course of the amendment process, the debate process on the floor, the votes on the floor, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Webster. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for being here. We appreciate it, and we'll look forward to considering your measure on the floor tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
Thank you.
let's have another hearing.
So we have circulated the rule, and I suspect there may be some amendments. So you have the motion there, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop has the motion. So the chair will be in receipt of a motion.
Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 1633, the Farm Dust Regulation Prevention Act of 2011, a structured rule. The rule provides for 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by their chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule waives all points of orders against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce, now printed in the bill, should be considered as original text for the purpose of the amendment, should be considered as read. The rule waives all points of orders against the committee's amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes in order only those amendments printed in the Rules Committee report accompanying the resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, and may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, shall not be subject to demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendment printed in this report. And finally, the rule provides one motion to reconsider with or without instructions.
You've heard the motion of the gentleman. Let me just say that obviously our attempt here is to make all of the amendments that have been submitted to us in order, as I said, with the exception of those that are duplicative or are non-germane, and we have been able to, in this motion, include 8 of the 11 amendments submitted, 5 amendments from Democrats, 3 from Republicans, and so we'll see if there are any amendments to the rule. Ms. Slaughter.
Sir, I do have some. First, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put Anna Eshu's statement in.
Without objection, Ms. Eshu's statement will appear in the record.
And I would like to move that the committee vote an open rule so that all members can have an opportunity to make amendments on this important issue.
Thank you very much. You've heard the motion of the gentlewoman from Rochester. Those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Been the chair that knows that. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions. Ms. Fox. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
And the clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 6 nays.
And the amendment is not agreed to. Are there further amendments? Ms. Slaughter.
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. I would like to move to make in order issue number 4. I move the committee make in order and provide necessary waivers for amendment number 4, offered by the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Eshu, which would require that if the EPA Administrator and the Clean Air Scientific Advisory Committee find that the exemption in this bill would increase the incidence of asthma attacks, respiratory disease, cardiovascular disease, or premature mortality, then the bill's exemption from the Clean Air Act for particulate pollution has no effect.
Thank you very much. You've heard the motion of the gentlewoman. Let me just say that I'm going to encourage a no vote based on the fact that And I know there may be disagreement on this, but we happen to believe, based on our staff recommendation, that the amendment that is offered by our friend from the Virgin Islands, Donna Christensen, addresses this issue. It would allow the EPA the authority under the Clean Air Act to step in and take action to reduce dangerous particle pollution if state, local, or tribal laws are not sufficient to protect public health. And so it's our sense that this is covered under that measure. So I'm going to urge a no vote. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the chair, the noes have it. The noes have it. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions. Ms. Fox. No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Woodall. No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern. Aye. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Aye. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Aye. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk, report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
And the motion is not agreed to. Are there further amendments? If not, the vote occurs on the motion of the gentleman from Utah. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed. Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Sessions. Ms. Fox. Aye. Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Woodall. Aye. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, aye. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, aye. Ms. Slaughter.
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern. No. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. No. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk, report the total.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
And the motion is agreed to, and this will be managed by Mr. Webster for the majority,
And Mr. Polis for the minority.
and Mr. Polis, I'm sure with the able assistance of Caspian. So,
Mr. Chairman?
thank you. Yeah, Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to claim a moment to clarify something. You were, I don't think you were at the hearing we had last Thursday, but Dr. Fox and I got into a little exchange in response to my amendment to try to once again get at these oil subsidies, and Dr. Fox said that she found it curious that during the period of time when you had the votes to do so, anything in the Rules Committee you wanted to do, that we basically didn't bring these types of amendments to the floor. And so I said I wasn't quite sure of that, so I did my research, and there were 8 instances in the 110th and 111th Congresses where where the House voted to curtail oil and gas subsidies. 4 of these measures were signed into law. So I think it's probably incorrect to say that we didn't offer any of these kinds of amendments. We may not have eliminated all the subsidies like I would have liked, but we moved in the right direction, unlike this Congress that continues to, on a regular basis, block every attempt to end subsidies for oil companies, notwithstanding the fact that these companies rake in billions and billions of dollars of profits each month. So I wanted to ask unanimous consent, if I could, to put in the record, and I'll give Dr. Fox a copy. I just think it's important that we're accurate.
Absolutely, we appreciate that.
And while I also have the floor, Mr. Chairman, you had mentioned, again, stay tuned on the payroll tax cut extension and unemployment insurance. So does that mean we should expect that these 2 items will be presented to the full House next week?
I think that it's safe to say that these are items that are going to be considered. I don't think I've ever said on this issue before, stay tuned. You said I've been saying that for a while. I know that this is under consideration. Discussions are taking place with our colleagues in the Senate, and I know there is a desire to address both the SGR issue and the payroll tax, and obviously the issue of UI, unemployment insurance, and we also have the appropriations issue that needs to be addressed, resolved, because as you know, a week from this Friday, the continuing resolution expires, and so we need to address that between now and then. So the answer to your question is yes.
Oh, good. That's hopeful.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Hastings has a very, very important photograph that he'd like to share with our colleagues of his granddaughter, since Caspian has been introduced. And I see a great likeness, I should say, between Mr. Hastings and the photograph of his granddaughter. Sorry we can't enter that into the record, but that's a different one than I saw. Yeah, you gave me this one. Zola. So here's, so let it be. Are you implying that I'm not a Republican? I mean, as I sit here holding this, I mean, I'm just wondering. Yeah.
Yeah, based on the results of the final, no, sir, I would never say that
Yeah.
in your presence, no, sir.
Yeah, okay. Thank you all very much, and hope everybody's having a nice holiday season. And yeah, oh, she does. We're especially here. So, without objection, the committee stands adjourned. Okay.